Is medical coding going to become obsolete? Is artificial intelligence going to replace medical coders? Well, let me discuss my thoughts on this. Hey everyone, I'm Victoria. I'm a medical coder, auditor, educator, content creator, national speaker, blogger, podcaster, and on my channel I provide tips, tricks, and tutorials to help you be successful in a medical coding career. But is that medical coding industry dying? Let's unwrap this. I've been a medical coder since 2007, and since 2007 I have been hearing those whispers that medical coding is going to the wayside because of the technology that is coming through with EMRs and with artificial intelligence. Now, honestly, this argument could be made about just about every single industry. I could say that customer service is going to get replaced by chatbots. We could say that my UPS man or my Amazon delivery man, which is here just about every single day, is going to get replaced by drones, and people will just pilot the drones to deliver the packages to my front door. By the way, if you're ever interested in dropping me a fan mail or a product you want me to try, there is a link to my PO box in the description of this video. So, spoiler alert, computer-assisted coding has existed since I started back in coding in 2007, and yes, there are still more and more coders growing and developing every single day, and more coding positions opening. Most providers, physicians, physician assistants, certified nurse midwives, they don't want to do their own coding. They would rather concentrate their clinical expertise on something else. The same way that even though I can do my own accounting with Quickbooks, I hire an accountant who is amazing because she knows all the ins and outs, how to make my books look fantastic, how everything gets sorted and analyzed to make sure that I am bulletproof in the event of an audit, knows how to defend me if I would get into any trouble with the IRS because she knows all the laws and expertise and can guide me appropriately. And that is the same thing with medical coding. Providers, generally speaking, don't want to do their own coding the same way they don't want to room their own patients. They delegate that to someone else on their team so that they can concentrate on the more value-based work that they provide. And I know on the surface medical coding seems simple. You just look something up in a book and it equates to this code, but there is a lot of changing guidelines. And yes, you can program the AI to changes. We do that every year. This has been going on for years, that there is computer-assisted coding. And there are some cases where the computer will pick the very accurate code based off of what's input, and other times completely off. The other thing you have to consider is that we need checks and balances, because even with all of the things that we have going on with manual processes, there are a lot of providers and organizations that are doing things incorrectly and they misinterpret things. And there are providers, a small amount of them, that are intentionally committing fraud. So there are providers who sometimes may know exactly what they did, and what they did equates to this code, but they're not providing the appropriate documentation that supports that code. And the codes are based off of the documentation, not on what the provider thinks they did, know they did. There has to be papers to back it up. There has to be evidence, documented evidence of what was performed to support those codes and billing for those services. So a lot of providers overestimate or underestimate the services that they are providing, or they pick the right code for what they did, but that documentation does not support what was done. Medical coding really is an art and a science. It's not just a code lookup concept. And again, EMRs are already doing this. There's lots of organizations that providers select what they think is the right code, and then it's scrubbed and reviewed by a medical coder. And there's different interpretations even based off of things like regional guidelines, and those guidelines can change. The codes can update. There's just different interpretations. It really is a gray area. There you can have 5 coders look at the same note and they might come up with different codes, especially in areas like evaluation and management, where certain criteria is not specifically defined by Medicare, and you have to develop internal policies on how your organization will comply and interpret these sort of gray scenarios. And the provider documentation doesn't always one-to-one match with a code. And there needs to be interpretation of, hey, we need you to clarify certain things in the documentation. We need you to submit an addenda. And an AI computer program alone is not going to be able to provide that feedback because of the analytical work that is involved. Now, this doesn't mean that there won't be shifts in medical coding, that the coding industry may change a little bit. So those who have an auditing credential or really can analyze more are going to have a better better positioning at continuing a long career in medical coding, because there might be a more auditing role that we take on, where a provider is using tools that help them select what is a likely code or what they feel is the appropriate code, and then a coder is really looking at that, verifying that it's the correct code, or sending it back, providing feedback, going, hey, you know what, you actually, it looks like may have done this, but that documentation doesn't support this better code that we can bill for a higher amount of dollars. And the other thing I hear a lot is, what if we go to a federally funded healthcare in the United States, like Medicare for All? Well, there's two things I want you to think about here. First and foremost is that medical coding is not just about reimbursement. It is about data collection, how much these diagnoses equate to these procedures, and tracking those and saying, hey, out of a pool of 100 diabetic patients that are assigned code E11.9, how many of them are going to move on to, and we would track this through those codes, how many of them will get a diabetic complication, which is a different code? How much did what procedures did they have? How much did those procedures cost? So that we know we have enough money budgeted to take care of these patients in the future. It doesn't mean that it's going to be a free-for-all, that providers can just bill anything that they want and, oh, we don't have to worry about it because it's automatically going to get paid, because we still have to have, again, that checks and balances, because there may be some providers who are maybe not so ethical and want to intentionally bill a high amount of services so that they can get lots of reimbursement from the federal government. The other thing I like to point out is that even though we have Medicare, over a third of Medicare patients elect to receive a Medicare replacement plan, a Medicare Advantage plan. So even though these patients get Medicare for quote unquote free once they hit 65, they elect to pay a little bit more to get a better program, that maybe they can have a better network, or they get benefits like a silver sneaker program where they can go to gyms in their area, or they might just have better contact with their providers. So even though they have that federally funded program, they pay out of pocket through a Geisinger or a Highmark or a Aetna to get a different program. And that percentage of patients that have Medicare and elect for a replacement plan is going up. So even if we were to go to a Medicare for All or a federally funded program, it stands to reason that these replacement plans would still exist for those that would like to elect for better coverage. So medical coding is not a dying career unless AI gets to the point that it can write a New York Times best-selling novel or defend me in court. It will not have the critical thinking and analytical skills to replace a very skilled medical coder. Have you been told that medical coding is going to be eliminated? What are your thoughts? Because I want to hear them. So leave them in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I will see you guys in the next video. And until then, just keep on coding on.